That evening, the rain wasn't just falling. It was punishing the pavement like the words my father had just hurled at me. The fund was never meant for someone who wastes time on computer games, he said, his voice cutting through the tension in our living room. My mother stood silently by the grand piano, her face a mask of disappointment as she clutched the acceptance letter I'd proudly placed in her hands moments before. Catherine will put your college fund to better use at medical school. You're on your own now, Olivia. Those words echoed in my mind as I stood outside our suburban home, holding nothing but a duffel bag and the shattered remains of my dreams. Little did they know that 5 years later, I would be sitting across from them in a boardroom, holding their professional futures in my hands. The daughter they had discarded was now the CEO reviewing their company for acquisition. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Westbrook family dinner table had always been a battlefield disguised as mahogany and fine china. Every evening at precisely 6:30 p.m., we gathered to perform the ritual of family dinner, a performance where my sister Catherine played the starring role, and I was perpetually cast as the understudy who would never see the spotlight. Catherine received another commendation from Dr. Harrington today, my mother, Eleanor Westbrook, announced as she delicately served portions of roasted salmon. He says she's showing exceptional promise in cellular research. My father, Richard Westbrook, beamed with undisguised pride. At 53, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never tasted failure. As the founder and president of Westbrook Medical Supplies, he had built a regional empire supplying hospitals throughout New England. His salt and pepper hair and tailored suits projected the image he valued most: success. "That's my girl," he said, raising his water glass in Catherine's direction. "Following the family tradition, medicine is in our blood." Catherine, 2 years my senior at 20, smiled modestly, though the triumph in her eyes was unmistakable. She was everything I wasn't: methodical, traditionally intelligent, and most importantly, interested in medicine. In our family, that was the golden ticket. I pushed my food around my plate, trying to gather courage. Today had to be the day. The acceptance letter had arrived that morning. Northeastern University's prestigious computer science program had not only admitted me, but offered a partial scholarship. Not enough to cover everything, but combined with the college fund my grandparents had established for both Catherine and me, it would be sufficient. "I have news too," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. My mother glanced at me, her expression already shifting to the polite interest she reserved for my achievements, like participation trophies to be acknowledged then forgotten. I got accepted to Northeastern, computer science. The silence that followed wasn't the stunned, proud silence I had foolishly hoped for. It was weighted, uncomfortable. "Computer science." My father set down his fork. "Olivia, we've discussed this. Technology is just a hobby, not a career path for a Westbrook." "Actually, Dad, tech is the future of healthcare. The program specializes in medical software systems and—" "Playing with computers all day isn't a profession," he interrupted. "You've always been bright, but you waste your potential on these games and websites." "They're not games. I've been coding actual programs, building databases. The admissions committee was impressed with the patient management system I designed for my senior project." My mother sighed. "Darling, your father and I thought you'd reconsidered pre-med at Boston University. We discussed this." "You discussed it," I corrected. "I told you I wasn't interested in medicine. I want to build systems that revolutionize healthcare technology." Catherine cleared her throat. "Technology is important, but patient care requires a human touch that computers can't provide." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Catherine had never seen my work, never asked about my projects, yet she felt qualified to dismiss them entirely. The partial scholarship isn't enough, my father said flatly. And I'm not paying for a computer hobby. I'm not asking you to pay. I'll use my college fund, the one Grandma and Grandpa set up for us. Another uncomfortable silence descended. My parents exchanged glances. About that, my mother began, her voice taking on the gentle tone she used when delivering unpleasant news to others. We've reallocated those funds. Reallocated? The word felt foreign on my tongue. What does that mean? My father straightened, shifting into his business posture. Catherine's medical school acceptance to Johns Hopkins came with prestige, but not enough financial support. The equipment requirements alone are substantial. As this aligns with the family legacy, we've directed your college fund to supplement hers. The room seemed to tilt sideways. You gave my college fund to Catherine? All of it? It's not like that, my mother interjected. We're investing in the future of Westbrook Medical. My future, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. That money was for my education. And it will serve education, Catherine's medical education, my father said firmly. Your computer interests can be pursued through a less expensive state school. Perhaps you should consider a sensible business degree instead. I looked at Catherine, searching for a hint of discomfort, embarrassment, perhaps even guilt. Instead, she examined her perfectly manicured nails, avoiding my gaze. You had no right, I said quietly. Grandma and Grandpa set up those funds for each of us? As your parents, we have every right to make educational decisions until you're 21, my father countered. The trustees agreed that this allocation best honors your grandparents' intentions for the Westbrook legacy. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm going to Northeastern. I'll find a way. Don't be dramatic, Olivia, my mother sighed. If you insist on this computer path, you'll need to fund it yourself. Perhaps this will teach you the value of practical career choices. I left the table and went straight to my room, pulling out the folder containing my acceptance package. The partial scholarship would cover about 40% of the tuition. Working part-time wouldn't come close to covering the rest, not to mention books, housing, and living expenses. Later that evening, I heard a soft knock on my door. Catherine entered without waiting for a response, a lifelong habit that perfectly encapsulated our relationship. You shouldn't take it personally, she said, settling on the edge of my bed. Dad's just looking out for the family business. My medical degree will directly benefit Westbrook Medical. While my degree wouldn't, I challenged. She shrugged. Computer people are everywhere. Doctors with connections to medical supply companies are more valuable. I could transform their entire operation. Their inventory system is still practically in the Stone Age. Catherine smiled condescendingly. That's not how Dad sees it. She reached out to pat my hand. Look, there are cheaper schools, or take a gap year, work at the company in the mailroom or something. The next morning, I waited until my parents were having breakfast before entering the dining room with the acceptance letter in hand. I placed it on the table between them. I wanted to show you exactly what you're dismissing, I said calmly. This isn't about games. It's about innovation that could transform healthcare delivery. My father barely glanced at the letter. Olivia, the decision is made. Catherine needs the funds for Johns Hopkins. Their medical program opens doors that will benefit this family for generations. And what about my future? Your future is what you make it, he replied. If you're as talented as you claim, prove it, without handouts. The money wasn't a handout. It was my inheritance from my grandparents. My mother's lips tightened. Don't be selfish, Olivia. Catherine's contribution to medicine will help countless patients. I took a deep breath. If that's how you feel, I'll leave today. I won't be a burden on this family anymore. Don't be ridiculous, my father scoffed. Where would you go? Anywhere that values what I have to offer. I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and Be reasonable. Upstairs, I packed a single duffel bag with essentials, clothes, my laptop, external hard drives, containing my projects and the $3,200 I'd saved from summer programming jobs. When I came downstairs, my parents were waiting by the front door. "This tantrum is beneath you," my father said sternly. "Put your things away and join us for dinner. We can discuss reasonable alternatives for your education." "Like community. College while I work in the mailroom?" I asked, recalling Catherine's suggestion. "There's nothing wrong with starting at the bottom," he replied. Except Catherine never had to. I reached for the door handle. "I'll make my own way." "If you walk out that door," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet, "don't expect our support. Not financially, not emotionally." I paused, the weight of his threat settling on my shoulders. 18 years of conditional love, of second place, finishes of being valued less than my sister, all crystallized in that moment. "I never really had it anyway," I replied, and stepped out into the rain. The August rain soaked through my jacket as I walked away from the only home I'd ever known, each step a strange mixture of terror and liberation. The weight of my duffel bag pulled at my shoulder, but it was nothing compared to the weight that had been lifted from my spirit. For the first time in my life, I wasn't competing for approval I would never receive. I had exactly one place to go. Mira Zhang, my coding partner from the robotics club, had an apartment near Northeastern where she had already started summer classes. We had spent countless hours collaborating on projects, staying up late debugging code while Catherine attended elegant pre-med socials with my parents. If anyone would understand my situation, it would be Mira. I found shelter at a bus stop and called her from my cell phone, which would likely be cut off within days once my father realized I had actually left. "Olivia, everything okay?" Mira's voice was tinged with concern. I rarely called, preferring to text. "Not really," I admitted, watching raindrops create rivulets on the pavement. My parents gave my college fund to Catherine. When I objected, things escalated. I left home. A brief silence followed. "Where are you now?" "Bus stop on Oakmont Street." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 40 minutes later, Mira's beat-up Honda Civic pulled up to the curb. She leaned across to push open the passenger door, her face a mixture of concern and determination. At 20, Mira was already in her second year at Northeastern, having skipped a grade in high school. Her practical nature was exactly what I needed right now. "You're soaked," she observed as I slid into the passenger seat. "Are you okay?" "Depends on your definition," I replied, attempting a smile. "Physically fine. Financially ruined. Emotionally. Processing." Mira nodded, pulling away from the curb. "Start processing at my place. My roommate moved out last week. Rent's due, but we can figure something out." Mira's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in a converted Victorian house. The space was small but immaculately organized, a testament to Mira's methodical nature. Posters of famous women in tech adorned the walls: Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper, Annie Easley. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Shower first," she instructed, pointing down the hall. "I'll make tea." Under the hot water, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. My future, so carefully planned around that college fund, had vanished. My family had chosen Catherine, again, and made it abundantly clear where their priorities lay. The tears I shed mixed with the shower water, washing away as I forced myself to focus on what came next. When I emerged in borrowed sweats, Mira was waiting with steaming mugs of green tea and her laptop open on the coffee table. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble. "You have 3 immediate problems: housing, tuition, and living expenses. Let's solve them one by one. Leave it to Mira to break down an emotional crisis into a set of solvable problems." The partial scholarship covers 40% of tuition, I said, sitting beside her. Housing and food are the immediate concerns. Mira nodded. My roommate left because she got an internship in New York. The room is paid through August. That gives us 3 weeks to figure out September's rent. I have $3,200 saved, I offered, but that won't go far once tuition payments start. What about student loans? I shook my head. I'd need a co-signer. My parents obviously won't help, and I don't have other family members close enough. Mira took a thoughtful sip of her tea. Okay, so we need income fast. I can look for tech support jobs, programming freelance work, anything that pays. Good start, but Northeastern has a co-op program. You can work at a tech company while earning credit. It might delay graduation by a semester, but the pay is decent. I'd researched the co-op program, but it typically started after completing 2 semesters. Freshmen aren't eligible, I reminded her. Rules can be flexible, Mira countered with a determined gleam in her eye. Especially if you demonstrate exceptional skills. And I happen to know Professor Abernathy is desperately seeking a research assistant for his healthcare database project. For the first time since leaving home, I felt a flicker of hope. You think he'd consider a freshman? I think he'd consider someone who built a functional patient management system as a high school project, Mira replied. Which reminds me, your project files. Tell me they're in that bag. I nodded, pulling out my external hard drives. Everything's here, every line of code. Good, because tomorrow we're going to polish your portfolio and get you in front of Abernathy. That night I slept on Mira's couch, exhaustion finally overcoming the adrenaline and emotional turmoil. I dreamed of computer screens filled with code, of locked doors and missing keys, of my father's dismissive expression as he turned away from me. I woke at sunrise, determined to prove him wrong. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Mira helped me refine my patient management system, adding features that highlighted its potential integration with hospital supply chains, a deliberate connection to my father's business that I included not out of sentimentality, but strategic thinking. If I could demonstrate real-world applications that even Westbrook Medical Supplies could benefit from, Professor Abernathy would be more likely to see my value. We sent my portfolio to him on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was sitting in his cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of academic journals and half-empty coffee cups. Professor Abernathy was not what I expected. Instead of the stereotypical academic, he was a former tech industry executive who had transitioned to teaching after selling his healthcare software company. He scrolled through my projects on his monitor, occasionally murmuring appreciation. This inventory tracking algorithm is quite elegant, he noted, pushing his glasses up his nose. Did you develop it yourself? Yes, I confirmed. I designed it to minimize waste in pharmaceutical inventory systems. Impressive. Most of my graduate students couldn't code this efficiently. He turned to face me directly. Ms. Zhang speaks highly of your abilities, but your academic record is obviously limited. You're just starting your freshman year. Technically, I haven't even started yet, I admitted. Classes begin next month, if I can attend. His eyebrows rose. Financial concerns? I hesitated, then decided honesty was the only viable approach. My expected family contribution fell through. I'm working to find alternative funding. Professor Abernathy nodded thoughtfully. The research assistant position is typically reserved for second-year students or higher, however. He paused, glancing again at my code on the screen. Exceptions can be made for exceptional talent. The position includes a stipend and potential tuition credit. My heart raced. I would work harder than any second-year student. I believe you would. He closed my portfolio and leaned back in his chair. There's a catch, though. The project is in partnership with Boston Memorial Hospital. Their administrative systems are outdated, inefficient, and resistant to change. You'd be developing integration protocols between their existing systems and our new database architecture. I understand legacy systems, I assured him. My high school internship involved updating a clinic's patient records from paper to digital. This is considerably more complex, he warned. And the hospital administration is challenging. I grew up with challenging, I replied, thinking of years navigating my parents' expectations. I can handle difficult personalities. Professor Abernathy smiled for the first time. I believe you can, Ms. Westbrook. The position pays $18 per hour, 20 hours weekly during the semester, potentially full-time during breaks. There's also a tuition credit of $5,000 per semester after a 3-month probationary period. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but combined with my scholarship and careful budgeting, it might make continuing at Northeastern possible. When can I start? I asked. Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. He handed me a security badge. And Ms. Westbrook? Prove me right. I left his office with my first victory secured, small though it was. The research assistant position would provide income and valuable experience, but I still needed to cover immediate expenses. Mira's roommate situation bought me time, but not enough. That evening, I created profiles on freelance programming websites, offering to build websites, develop apps, and fix coding problems. I also applied for weekend shifts at a 24-hour cafe near campus and a position staffing the university computer, AB. By the time orientation week arrived, I had secured enough patchwork employment to survive. Barely. The cafe job paid minimum wage but included free meals during shifts. The computer lab position was only 10 hours weekly but allowed me to do homework during quiet periods. Freelance work was inconsistent but occasionally lucrative when I found clients who valued quality over cost. My first month of independence was a lesson in endurance. I woke at 5 a.m. to complete freelance projects before heading to Professor Abernathy's lab from 8 a.m. to noon. Afternoons were filled with classes, followed by computer lab hours until 10 p.m. Weekends meant double shifts at the cafe, serving coffee, to students whose parents funded their education and living expenses. I learned to function on 5 hours of sleep. I mastered the art of meal planning on a tight budget. I became an expert at finding free resources, from textbooks in the library to open-source alternatives to expensive software. One evening, as I was leaving the computer lab, my phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. Olivia, it's Catherine. Parents are worried. Are you okay? I stared at the message, emotions churning. After a month of silence, this was their approach? Sending Catherine as an emissary rather than reaching out directly? I typed several responses, deleting each one. Finally, I settled on the truth. I'm attending Northeastern as planned, working multiple jobs to pay for it myself. Tell them not to worry about the daughter they didn't invest in. Catherine's response came quickly. Don't be dramatic. They're your parents. They're allowed to make decisions about family money. The familiar dismissiveness ignited something in me. I took a deep breath and typed my final message. It wasn't family money. It was my money from my grandparents. But thank you for the clarity. I know exactly where I stand now. I blocked her number, then leaned against the wall of the building, allowing myself exactly 1 minute to feel the hurt, the rejection, the unfairness. Then I straightened my shoulders and continued walking. I didn't have time for family drama. I had a future to build. By the end of my first semester at Northeastern, I had established a tenuous stability. My grades were excellent despite my punishing schedule, and Professor Abernathy had moved me from probationary to permanent status in his research lab. The $5,000 tuition credit materialized as promised, easing my financial burden slightly. I had moved from Mira's couch to a shared bedroom in a cramped apartment with 3 other engineering students, each of us working multiple jobs to make ends meet. My life had fallen into an exhausting but manageable rhythm. Weekdays in the lab and classroom, Evenings in the computer center, weekends at the cafe. Sleep was a luxury I rationed carefully. Social life was practically non-existent, but I was surviving, and more importantly, I was learning. Boston Memorial Hospital's systems were exactly as challenging as Professor Abernathy had warned. Decades of patchwork upgrades had created a labyrinthine network that resembled digital archaeology, more than modern infrastructure. My job was to create interface protocols that would allow our new research database to communicate with their existing systems without disrupting daily operations. It was tedious, frustrating work. Hospital administrators resisted providing access to critical information, citing security concerns. IT staff were defensive about the systems they had maintained for years. Nurses and doctors, the actual users, were rarely consulted about their needs or pain points. One December afternoon, I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, trying to understand why my latest integration protocol had failed. Snow fell steadily outside the windows, and the cafeteria smelled of industrial disinfectant, barely masked by the aroma of reheated lasagna. I had skipped breakfast to make an early class and was running on nothing but coffee and determination. Mind if I join you? I looked up to see a woman in her 50s, wearing scrubs beneath a white lab coat. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled, back in a practical ponytail, and lines around her eyes suggested she smiled often, though she wasn't smiling now. "Go ahead," I replied, moving my laptop slightly to make room. She set down her tray and extended her hand. "Linda Mercer, Head of Emergency Nursing. Olivia Westbrook, Northeastern Research Team." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Ah, you're one of Abernathy's students working on the new system. How's that going?" I hesitated, unsure how candid I should be. Linda seemed to read my thoughts. "Off the record," she offered. "I've been here 23 years. I've seen systems come and go, each one promising to revolutionize healthcare delivery. Most just add more clicks to our workflow." Her frankness was refreshing after months of diplomatic navigation around hospital politics. "Honestly, it's a mess," I admitted. "We're trying to build bridges between systems that were never designed to communicate, and nobody seems interested in telling us what actually happens on the front lines." Linda laughed, a warm sound that drew glances from nearby tables. "Finally, someone who gets it. The administrators and IT department live in a different world than those of us who actually use these systems." "Exactly. I keep asking for user stories, what people actually need the system to do, but I get referred to managers who haven't worked with patients in years." Linda took a bite of her salad, considering me. "What if I could get you access to the people who really know what works and what doesn't?" "That would be incredible, actually." I run a monthly staff meeting for the emergency department. No administrators, no IT, just the nurses and physician assistants who use these systems every day. Come to the next one. Listen to what they have to say. That meeting changed everything. For 2 hours, I listened as nurses and physician assistants described their daily frustrations with the hospital's systems. They showed me workarounds they had developed, unofficial paper processes that supplemented digital failures, and critical workflow issues that no one had bothered to address. "The worst part is the inventory system," one veteran nurse explained. "We waste hours tracking down supplies that should be automatically reordered. Sometimes we have to borrow from other departments, and there's no way to track that digitally. The medication verification system times out every few minutes," another added. "We end up logging in 20 times per shift." I took furious notes, seeing connections and possibilities that had been invisible before. The problem wasn't just building bridges between old and new systems. It was recognizing that the existing workflow ignored critical user needs. That night, I called Professor Abernathy at home, something I had never done before. "It's not working because we're asking the wrong questions," I explained, unable to contain my excitement. We've been trying to integrate with systems that the actual users have already abandoned in practice. They've created shadow systems, informal workarounds, and paper processes because the official ones don't meet their needs. That's problematic, he replied cautiously. The hospital administrators won't be happy to hear their expensive systems are being circumvented. But it's an opportunity, I insisted. What if instead of just creating interface protocols, we develop a middleware layer that recognizes and incorporates these informal workflows, something that sits between the old systems and our new database, translating and enhancing both? Silence stretched across the phone line. Finally, he spoke. That's significantly beyond the scope of our current project. I know, but it would actually work. And isn't that the point? Another pause. Draw up a proposal. We'll discuss it in the lab tomorrow. I spent the entire night building a prototype and drafting a proposal. By morning, I had created a basic middleware concept that would capture the informal workflows while still integrating with both the legacy systems and our new database. It wasn't complete, but it demonstrated the potential. Professor Abernathy reviewed it with increasing interest. This is ambitious, he said finally. The hospital administration could reject it outright, or they could see it as the solution they've needed for years. I believe in it, I stated simply. Then let's refine it. But understand, this means additional work, significant additional work, beyond your current responsibilities. I'm used to that, I replied. For the next 3 months, I lived and breathed the middleware project. I scaled back my cafe hours to the minimum needed for survival, pouring every available moment into development. Linda arranged for me to shadow nurses and physician assistants, observing their workflows firsthand. I slept even less, coded even more, and gradually built a system that validated my vision. The presentation to hospital administrators was scheduled for early April. Professor Abernathy had warned me to keep expectations modest. They'll likely form a committee to evaluate it. That could take months. But when I demonstrated the prototype, showing how it captured medication verification with half the clicks, tracked borrowed supplies automatically, and integrated both official and unofficial workflows into a coherent system, the response was immediate. How soon can this be implemented? Asked the hospital's chief operating officer, Dr. Regina Montgomery. Implementation would require a phased approach, I explained, caught off guard by the direct question. Emergency department first, as that's where we've done our primary research, then expansion to other departments based on feedback and refinement. And the development team? Who would lead that? Professor Abernathy stepped forward. This is primarily Ms. Westbrook's design. She would naturally be involved in the implementation, though we'd need to discuss how that fits with her academic responsibilities. Dr. Montgomery turned her attention fully to me. Ms. Westbrook, what year are you? Freshman, I admitted. But I've been working with Professor Abernathy's lab since before the academic year began. Murmurs circulated through the room. Dr. Montgomery silenced them with a raised hand. Impressive. Boston Memorial has budgeted $2 million for systems integration this fiscal year. We've been evaluating proposals from established healthcare IT vendors, but none have addressed these workflow issues as directly as your prototype. She glanced at her executive team. I'd like to explore a development partnership with Northeastern, specifically funding completion of Ms. Westbrook's system, rather than purchasing an off-the-shelf solution. The room erupted in discussion. Questions about timeframes, resources, technical specifications. Professor Abernathy fielded most of them, occasionally deferring to me for specific details. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, despite the realization that my late-night project might actually transform into something significant. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Montgomery approached me directly. Your understanding of our operational challenges is unusual for someone without healthcare experience, she observed. Most programmers focus on technical elegance rather than practical workflow. My family is in medical supply, I explained, the words emerging before I could reconsider. I grew up hearing about healthcare systems and integration challenges. Westbrook, she repeated thoughtfully. Any relation to Westbrook Medical Supplies? My heart stuttered. My father is the founder. Richard Westbrook? I've met him at several industry conferences. He's quite proud of his daughter in medical school. That would be my sister Catherine, I clarified, keeping my voice neutral. I chose technology instead. Dr. Montgomery studied me with new interest. Interesting choice given the family business. Well, Ms. Westbrook, your interesting choice may have just saved this hospital millions in failed systems integration. We'll be in touch about next steps. 2 weeks later, Boston Memorial Hospital and Northeastern University announced a formal development partnership. My middleware system, now officially named Metalink, would be developed as a joint venture, with a pilot implementation in the emergency department scheduled for fall. The project came with resources I had never imagined: a development team of 4 programmers, a dedicated project manager, and a stipend that allowed me to quit both the cafe and computer lab jobs. Most significantly, the university converted my research position into a specialized independent study program, granting full academic credit for my work on Medilink. In a single semester, I had gone from struggling student to project lead on a major healthcare initiative. My financial situation, while still not lavish, had stabilized. My academic path had accelerated dramatically. On the day the partnership was announced, I received another text from Catherine. Just heard about your hospital project from Dad's colleague. Sounds interesting. Parents still asking about you. Maybe time to reconcile? I stared at the message, considering the subtle shift. No longer dismissive, now almost respectful. Not because they cared about me, but because my work had gained external validation from their professional circles. My reply was brief, but pointed. When they're ready to respect my choices, not just my accomplishments, we can talk. Until then, I'm building my own path. I didn't block her this time. It wasn't necessary anymore. I had moved beyond needing their approval or fearing their judgment. For the first time, I was defining success on my own terms, and by those terms, I was just getting started. The Metalink pilot implementation exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Emergency department efficiency metrics improved by 28% in the first quarter. Medication errors decreased by 33%. Staff satisfaction scores rose to their highest levels in 5 years. Most importantly, the system actually worked the way healthcare providers needed it to work. The difference is that you built it for us, not for administrators, Linda Mercer explained during one of our weekly feedback sessions. Every other system I've used in 23 years was designed to generate reports for people who never touch patients. By the beginning of my sophomore year, Boston Memorial had approved full hospital implementation, increasing the project budget and extending our partnership agreement. Professor Abernathy had transitioned from direct oversight to an advisory role, leaving me as the primary architect of the expanding system. You've outgrown the research assistant position, he told me during our semester planning meeting. The university is creating a special designation for you, Innovation Fellow. It comes with full tuition coverage and a stipend equivalent to a graduate teaching assistant. I stared at him in disbelief. Full tuition? He nodded, smiling at my reaction. The hospital's board of directors specifically requested it. They see you as an investment worth protecting. Financial stability felt foreign after months of careful budgeting and constant work. I upgraded from my shared bedroom to a small studio apartment closer to campus. I purchased a new laptop to replace my struggling machine. Most significantly, I began building a modest emergency fund, a cushion against future uncertainty that provided peace of mind I hadn't experienced since leaving home. The expanded implementation brought new challenges. Each hospital department had unique workflows, specialized requirements, and established routines. I found myself mediating between technical possibilities and practical realities, translating clinical needs into system specifications. Days grew longer as the project scope expanded. I adjusted my class schedule to accommodate implementation meetings, sometimes attending lectures via recording rather than in person. My grades remained excellent, but the balance between academic requirements and professional responsibilities became increasingly complex. During this period, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Victoria Chen, Chief Medical Information Officer at Massachusetts General Hospital. She had heard about Medilink from colleagues at Boston Memorial and wanted to discuss potential applications at MGH. Your approach to workflow integration is precisely what our institution has been seeking, she wrote. Would you be available to present an overview to our executive team? Professor Abernathy was ecstatic when I showed him the email. This is extraordinary, Olivia. Mass General is one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country. If they adopt Medilink, others will follow. But Boston Memorial has exclusive rights to the current implementation, I pointed out. The partnership agreement is specific. The implementation, yes, he agreed. But the intellectual framework, the core concept, that's something that could be adapted for other institutions without violating our agreement. That conversation planted a seed. If Medilink's approach could benefit multiple hospitals, each with their own legacy systems and unique workflows, the potential applications extended far beyond a single implementation. The Massachusetts General presentation led to a paid consultation agreement, allowing me to advise their IT team on workflow integration principles while maintaining my primary commitment to Boston Memorial. The additional income was welcome, but more valuable was the expanding network of healthcare technology professionals who began seeking my input. By spring semester, I was dividing my time between coursework, the Boston Memorial implementation, and consulting projects for 3 additional hospitals. The university accommodated my unusual situation by creating a specialized academic track that incorporated my professional work into my degree requirements. My 20th birthday arrived. With little fanfare, Mira insisted on taking me out for dinner at a restaurant nicer than our usual student haunts, joined by a small group of friends I had made through my various projects. To Olivia, Mira toasted, raising her glass, who somehow manages to be a full-time student, a software architect, and a consultant without completely losing her mind. The jury's still out on that last part, I joked, though the sentiment touched me deeply. These friends, unlike the social circles my parents had tried to cultivate for me, valued me for who I actually was, not for who they wanted me to be. Later that evening, returning to my apartment, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. Olivia Westbrook, this is Marcus Daniels, CTO at Vector Health Systems. I recognized the name immediately. Vector Health was one of the largest healthcare technology companies in the country, providing systems to hundreds of hospitals nationwide. Yes, Mr. Daniels. How can I help you? I'll be direct. We've been following your work at Boston Memorial with great interest. Your approach to integration and workflow management aligns with directions we've been exploring internally. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities if you're open to the conversation. The call lasted 45 minutes, concluding with an invitation to visit Vector's headquarters in Cambridge the following week. I hung up, feeling both excited and unsettled. Vector represented both opportunity and challenge. Their resources and reach could amplify Medilink's impact exponentially, but corporate priorities didn't always align with user needs. The Vector headquarters occupied a gleaming glass tower overlooking the Charles River. I dressed carefully for the meeting, selecting a tailored blazer and professional slacks rather than my usual student attire. At 20, I was acutely aware of the need to project confidence and competence in rooms filled with executives twice my age. Marcus Daniels proved to be younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with an engineer's precise manner and refreshing directness. "Let me explain why you're here," he began once introductions were complete. Vector's current hospital information systems are comprehensive but inflexible. We excel at administrative functions, financial management, and regulatory compliance. Where we struggle is workflow integration, exactly the problem your Metalink system addresses so elegantly. "I appreciate the acknowledgement," I replied carefully. Medilink was developed specifically for Boston Memorial's environment, though. Its strength comes from being tailored to actual user behaviors in that specific context. "Precisely," Daniels agreed. "And therein lies both the brilliance and the limitation. What interests us isn't the specific implementation, but the methodology. Your approach to identifying and incorporating informal workflows into formal systems." What followed was a detailed technical discussion about architecture, scalability, and implementation strategies. Throughout the conversation, I became increasingly aware that this wasn't merely an information exchange. It was an evaluation of me as much as my work. As the meeting concluded, Daniels finally arrived at his purpose. "Vector would like to offer you a position, Ms. Westbrook, Senior Solutions Architect, focusing on next-generation integration systems. The role would include leading a development team to expand your methodologies into a framework applicable across diverse healthcare environments." The offer was stunning: a six-figure salary, comprehensive benefits, and equity options in a major healthcare technology corporation. For someone who had been counting cafe tips less than 2 years earlier, it represented financial security beyond imagination. "I'm flattered," I responded, "but I'm still completing my degree, and I have commitments to Boston Memorial and the PSI, other hospitals I'm currently advising." Daniels nodded. "We've anticipated those concerns. The position could be structured to accommodate your academic completion, perhaps as a part-time role initially. As for your existing commitments, Vector could potentially assume those contracts with appropriate transitions." "I need time to consider," I said. "Of course. This isn't a decision to make hastily." He handed me a folder containing the formal offer. "Take 2 weeks. Consider carefully what you want your impact to be in healthcare technology." That question, what impact I wanted to have, followed me back to campus and throughout the days that followed. The Vector offer represented validation and opportunity, but something about it troubled me. In our discussions, patient outcomes and provider experiences had been secondary considerations to market position and competitive advantage. I sought Professor Abernathy's advice, showing him the offer letter and explaining my reservations. "It's an exceptional opportunity," he acknowledged. "Few students, few professionals at any stage, receive this kind of recognition." "But," I prompted, sensing his hesitation, "but it would fundamentally change your relationship to the work. At Boston Memorial, you're developing solutions directly informed by providers and patients. At Vector, you'd be designing systems primarily for sale to hospital administrators." His assessment articulated exactly what had been troubling me. "So you think I should decline?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you should consider what motivated you to create Medilink in the first place. Was it to advance your career, or was it to solve problems that actually matter to healthcare delivery?" The answer was clear, though the decision remained difficult. After a week of deliberation, I called Marcus Daniels. "I've decided to decline your offer," I told him. "While I'm honored by Vector's interest, I believe my work currently has the most impact through direct hospital collaboration." "I respect your decision," Daniels replied, though disappointment edged his voice. "Perhaps we could discuss a consulting arrangement instead. Vector could benefit from your insights while you maintain your independence." This alternative appealed to my practical side. A consulting relationship would provide additional income and industry exposure without requiring me to compromise my approach or abandon my existing commitments. I'd be open to exploring that possibility, I agreed. The resulting arrangement proved more valuable than I could have anticipated. Vector contracted me to advise their integration team, exposing me to enterprise-scale development processes and resources while allowing me to maintain my independence. The experience expanded my understanding of commercial healthcare technology and highlighted the gaps between corporate solutions and frontline needs. More significantly, the Vector connection introduced me to a wider circle of healthcare technology investors and entrepreneurs. At industry conferences and networking events, I found myself increasingly sought after for my unique perspective. The rare technologist who had actually shadowed nurses, observed clinical workflows, and built systems that acknowledged the realities of patient care. One such event, a healthcare innovation symposium in Boston, led to a pivotal conversation with Elaine Margolis, founder of Horizon Partners, a venture capital firm specializing in healthcare technology. "Your approach is refreshingly patient-centered," she commented after my panel presentation on workflow integration. "Most technologists in this space are solving for efficiency or billing optimization, not actual care delivery. That's because most of them have never spent time on a hospital floor," I replied. She smiled. "Precisely, which makes your perspective particularly valuable." She handed me her card. "I'd like to continue this conversation. Horizon is always looking for visionaries who understand both technology and healthcare realities." That initial conversation evolved into regular advisory meetings. Elaine became both mentor and sounding board as I navigated the complex intersection of technology, patient care, and business reality. Her experience helped me recognize patterns and opportunities I might otherwise have missed. "You've created something remarkable with MediLink," she told me during one of our discussions. "But you're implementing it one hospital at a time, limited by your personal bandwidth and institutional boundaries." "What's the alternative?" I asked. "Scale," she replied simply. "Not through a corporate acquisition that would dilute your vision, but through a purpose-built entity designed specifically to advance your methodology." "You're suggesting I start a company," I realized. "I'm suggesting you consider the possibility," she corrected. "You've proven the concept, demonstrated the value, and established credibility. The next logical step is creating a vehicle to expand your impact beyond what you can personally implement." The idea was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. I had never envisioned myself as an entrepreneur. That had been my father's domain. Yet the limitations of my current approach were becoming increasingly apparent. Each new hospital implementation required extensive customization and personal involvement, creating a bottleneck that restricted MediLink's potential reach. "I wouldn't know where to begin," I admitted. Elaine's smile widened. "That's where Horizon Partners might be able to help. If you're serious about exploring this path, we should talk about what seed funding for a health tech startup actually looks like." By the end of my sophomore year, that conversation had evolved into a concrete possibility. With Elaine's guidance, I developed a business plan for Synapse Health Systems, a startup focused on bringing MediLink's workflow integration methodology to hospitals nationwide through a configurable platform approach rather than custom implementations. The potential was clear, but timing presented a dilemma. Launching a company while still completing my degree seemed impossible, yet delaying risked losing the momentum MediLink had established. "The opportunity is now," Elaine advised. "The healthcare technology landscape is shifting toward greater integration and user-centered design. Waiting 2 years to complete your degree could mean missing the window." Professor Abernathy offered a potential solution. "Northeastern's cooperative education model is flexible. We could structure your final 2 years as an entrepreneurial co-op, essentially treating your company launch as your experiential learning component." The pathway began to clarify. Form the company now, with academic support and venture funding, while completing my degree requirements through applied learning in the startup environment. As my sophomore year concluded, I stood at another pivotal threshold, no longer just surviving or proving my capabilities, but preparing to build something that could transform healthcare technology on a scale I had never imagined possible. The journey from rejected daughter to emerging healthcare innovator had been neither straight nor simple. Yet each challenge, each limitation, had forced creative solutions and unexpected opportunities. The college fund my parents had redirected, to Catherine now seemed almost irrelevant, a closed door that had ultimately led to a more meaningful path. I hadn't just found a way to attend Northeastern despite my parents' actions. I had discovered a vision and purpose that transcended their limited expectations for my life. Synapse Health Systems began in a converted warehouse space in Cambridge's Innovation District. The open-concept office, with its exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and communal workspaces, represented everything Westbrook Medical Supplies was not: modern, collaborative, and unfettered by tradition. Elaine Margolis and Horizon Partners provided $7 million in seed funding, enough to secure the office space, hire a small core team, and fund initial product development. Professor Abernathy joined as Chief Science Officer, splitting his time between his university duties and the startup. Linda Mercer came aboard as Clinical Integration Director, bringing her practical experience and provider perspective. My transition to CEO was both exhilarating and daunting. At 20, I became responsible not just for my own work, but for the livelihoods of 12 employees and the stewardship of millions in investor capital. The role required skills beyond coding or system design, negotiation, leadership, strategic planning, and financial management. Imposter syndrome is universal among founders, Elaine assured me during one of our weekly mentoring sessions. Especially young founders. The trick isn't eliminating self-doubt, it's learning to make decisions despite it. Those decisions came rapidly in the early months. We needed to transform Metalink from a custom implementation into a configurable platform that could adapt to diverse hospital environments without requiring extensive reprogramming. This meant rebuilding the architecture from the ground up while preserving the core principles that had made the original system successful. I established a development methodology that required our engineers to regularly shadow healthcare providers. Each team member, regardless of role, spent at least one day monthly observing clinical workflows in partner hospitals. This unconventional approach initially met resistance. Software developers typically preferred coding to field observation, but quickly demonstrated its value in the quality of our solutions. "You can't solve problems you don't understand," became the company mantra, emblazoned on wall posters and coffee mugs throughout our office. 6 months into development, we were ready to pilot the platform at 2 mid-sized hospitals in the Boston area. The implementations would test not just the technology, but our deployment methodology and training approach. Success would position us for Series A funding. Failure would likely end the venture before it truly began. The night before our first pilot launch, I remained in the office long after everyone else had departed. Sitting alone amid the desks and whiteboards, I found myself questioning everything. The architecture, the business model, my own capacity to lead an enterprise rather than just develop software. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Our communication had settled into an occasional restrained exchange of brief updates. Completed first surgical rotation. Dad mentioned Westbrook Medical might update its inventory system next year. Thought you might find that ironic given your new venture. The message hit like a lightning bolt. Westbrook Medical Supplies, my father's company, was considering a system update. The company whose outdated technology had partially inspired my original interest in healthcare workflow integration. The business my father had assumed I had no relevant skills to contribute to. I hesitated, then replied, "Thanks for the info. Interesting timing. Good luck with your rotation." The coincidence occupied my thoughts as I finally left the office, walking the short distance to my apartment through the crisp autumn air. Westbrook Medical was precisely the type of company Synapse's platform could benefit, a traditional medical supplier struggling to integrate with increasingly digital hospital environments. But pursuing them as a client seemed impossibly complicated given our history. Would my father even consider a system developed by the daughter he had essentially disowned? Would I want to work with him after his dismissal of my capabilities and dreams? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the immediate challenge of our pilot implementations. Those questions could wait for another day. The pilots exceeded expectations. Both hospitals reported significant efficiency improvements and positive user feedback. Minor issues emerged, of course. They always did with new systems, but the core architecture proved sound and adaptable. These early successes attracted attention. Healthcare technology publications wrote feature articles about Synapse's innovative approach. Conferences invited me to speak on panels about workflow integration and user-centered design. Most importantly, hospitals began reaching out directly, inquiring about implementation timelines and pricing. 8 months after founding, we secured $12 million in Series A funding from a consortium led by Horizon Partners, allowing us to expand the team to 35 and accelerate product development. With the additional resources, we launched a formal sales department and began strategic market outreach. We should develop a targeted approach to medical suppliers, suggested Marcus Reed, our newly hired Chief Revenue Officer. They represent a significant opportunity for integration with our hospital clients. What specifically are you thinking? I asked during our strategy meeting. Most medical suppliers still use outdated inventory systems that don't communicate effectively with modern hospital procurement platforms. If we could develop an integration module specifically for that market segment, we could create substantial value on both sides of the transaction. The suggestion made perfect sense strategically. Medical supply integration represented a critical gap in healthcare technology, one I understood intimately from my family background. Let's develop a list of potential partners for a pilot program. I agreed. Focus on regional suppliers first. They're likely more open to innovation than the larger corporations. The medical supply module development proceeded alongside our hospital implementations. We partnered with 2 smaller supply companies to understand their workflows and integration challenges, building a solution that bridged their inventory systems with hospital procurement platforms. 1 year after founding Synapse, we had 16 successful hospital implementations, a growing client pipeline, and a reputation for delivering systems that actually worked for frontline healthcare providers. The company had expanded to 58 employees and moved to larger offices in the same innovation district. Industry recognition followed. Modern Healthcare named me to their 40 under 40 list of healthcare innovators. MIT Technology Review included Synapse in their annual 50 Smartest Companies feature. A major healthcare conference invited me to deliver a keynote address on the future of integrated clinical workflows. It was at this conference that I encountered my father for the first time in nearly 3 years. I had just concluded my presentation when I noticed him in the audience, sitting near the back of the hall. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his face more lined. He didn't approach immediately, but our eyes met briefly across the crowded room. Later, during the networking reception, he finally made his way to where I stood speaking with a hospital CIO. "Excuse me," he said, interrupting our conversation with the confidence I remembered well. "Might I have a moment with Ms. Westbrook?" The CIO nodded politely and moved away, leaving us face to face for the first time since I had walked out of our family home. "Your presentation was impressive," my father began stiffly. "Your understanding of healthcare workflows is quite comprehensive." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the emotional undercurrent. "It comes from actually listening to the people who use the systems." He nodded, seeming to search for words. An unusual circumstance for Richard Westbrook, who always knew exactly what to say. Catherine mentioned your company, he continued. I didn't connect it to the Synapse presentation in the program until I saw you on stage. Is that why you're here? Because of Catherine? I'm here because Westbrook Medical needs to update its systems, he admitted. Our hospital clients are demanding better integration, and our current platform is becoming obsolete. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had dismissed my interest in technology as a hobby was now acknowledging, however indirectly, that I might have something valuable to offer. Synapse specializes in exactly that kind of integration, I replied neutrally. Especially for medical suppliers interfacing with hospital systems. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, he cleared his throat. Would your company be willing to provide a consultation? Professionally, I mean. The request represented both opportunity and complication. Westbrook Medical would be a significant client for Synapse, potentially opening doors to similar suppliers nationwide. Yet the personal history created obvious concerns about objectivity and potential conflicts. I'd need to discuss it with my executive team, I said carefully. We have a specific process for evaluating potential clients. He seemed taken aback by this response, perhaps expecting either immediate agreement or outright rejection. Of course. You have my contact information? I'll have someone from our office reach out to schedule an initial discovery call. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Your mother would like to see you, he added abruptly. If you're amenable. The comment caught me off guard. This isn't the place for personal discussions. No, I suppose not. He hesitated, then extended his hand formally. Congratulations on your success, Olivia. It's impressive what you've built. I accepted the handshake briefly. Thank you. I should return to my guests. As I moved away, rejoining a group of hospital executives across the room, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Validation, certainly. My father had effectively acknowledged both my expertise and success, but also a lingering sadness for the relationship that had been broken, perhaps irreparably, by his inability to see my potential before outside validation confirmed it. The following week, I called a special meeting of Synapse's executive team to discuss the Westbrook medical opportunity. I need to be transparent about the potential complications, I explained, after outlining the technical requirements. Richard. Westbrook is my father, and our personal relationship is strained. I left home 3 years ago when my parents redirected my college fund to my sister's medical school expenses. Marcus Reed, our CRO, whistled softly. That's a significant conflict of interest. Which is why I'm raising it directly, I agreed. If we pursue this opportunity, I would recuse myself from direct negotiations and client management. Linda Mercer frowned. But your expertise in medical supply workflows is central to our approach. Removing you from the project would compromise our methodology. There's another consideration, added our CFO, Daniela Martinez. Westbrook Medical is one of the largest regional suppliers in New England. Successfully integrating their systems could open doors to similar clients nationwide. From a business perspective, it's a strategic opportunity we should carefully consider. The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, weighing professional opportunities against personal complications. Eventually, we developed a structured approach. Synapse would engage with Westbrook Medical through a standard discovery process, with Professor Abernathy leading the technical assessment, while I remained informed but not directly involved in client interactions. If at any point the personal history interferes with professional delivery, we reevaluate immediately, I stipulated. Our reputation for objectivity and client focus cannot be compromised. The team agreed unanimously. The following day, our business development director reached out to Westbrook Medical to schedule the initial consultation. What followed was a carefully choreographed dance of professional engagement overlaid with personal history. Professor Abernathy led the Westbrook medical assessment, documenting integration challenges that mirrored those we had addressed in other medical supply environments. Their systems were exactly as outdated as I had suspected, heavily manual. Processes bolted onto aging digital infrastructure, creating information silos and workflow inefficiencies. The technical case for implementing Synapse's platform was compelling. 3 weeks after the initial assessment, we presented a formal proposal to Westbrook Medical's executive team. I attended the meeting, but positioned myself as Synapse's CEO rather than the project lead, allowing Professor Abernathy and Marcus Reed to conduct the primary presentation. My father sat at the head of the Westbrook conference table, flanked by his executive team. He maintained strict professionalism throughout the presentation, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, resource requirements, and expected outcomes. Only once, when Professor Abernathy explained our methodology of shadowing actual users to understand workflow realities, did his expression change slightly, a momentary acknowledgement, perhaps, of the approach I had championed from the beginning. At the conclusion of the presentation, he thanked us formally. "We'll review your proposal and be in touch within 2 weeks with our decision." As we gathered our materials to leave, he asked unexpectedly, "Ms. Westbrook, might I have a brief word in private?" The request surprised everyone in the room. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. "Of course, Mr. Westbrook." When the others had departed, leaving us alone in the conference room, he seemed suddenly uncertain, a strange look on a man renowned for his decisiveness. "The proposal is impressive," he began, "very comprehensive. Thank you. Our team worked hard to address your specific integration challenges." He nodded, then asked bluntly, "Is this uncomfortable for you? Working with Westbrook Medical after everything?" The direct acknowledgement of our history caught me off guard. I've recused myself from direct project management precisely to avoid potential conflicts, I replied carefully. Synapse can provide significant value to your company. That's my professional assessment, separate from our personal history. He studied me for a long moment. "You've built something remarkable," he said finally, "in ways I didn't anticipate. The closest thing to an apology I would likely ever receive from Richard Westbrook." "Thank you," I responded simply. "I should join my team." As I reached the door, he added, "Catherine finishes medical school next month. She's considering residency options." I paused but didn't turn around. "Wish her well from me." Outside in the parking lot, Professor Abernathy waited beside our car. "Everything all right?" he asked, noting my expression. "Fine," I assured him. "Just complicated." He nodded, understanding. Family usually is. 1 week later, Westbrook Medical Supplies signed the contract with Synapse Health Systems, becoming our 19th client and our first major medical supplier implementation. The project would serve as a case study for similar integrations throughout the industry. The personal significance wasn't lost on me. 3 years after being told I had nothing valuable to contribute to healthcare, my company would be transforming my father's business, not through the medical degree he had valued so highly, but through the technical expertise he had dismissed as a hobby. Life had come full circle in ways none of us could have predicted, but the journey was far from complete. The Westbrook Medical Supplies implementation became a turning point for Synapse Health Systems. Medical suppliers across the country took notice when one of the industry's traditional stalwarts embraced our integration platform. Inquiries multiplied, and our sales pipeline expanded dramatically. I maintained my professional distance from the Westbrook project, receiving updates through Professor Abernathy and our implementation team, but avoiding direct contact with my father or his executives. This separation served both companies well, allowing the technical integration to proceed without personal complications. 6 months into the implementation, Westbrook Medical reported a 34% reduction in order processing time and a 27% decrease in inventory discrepancies between their systems and hospital clients. These metrics exceeded our initial projections and validated our approach to medical supply integration. My father sent a formal letter of commendation to Synapse's board of directors, praising our exceptional technical expertise and understanding of healthcare supplier workflows. The letter made no reference to our personal connection, maintaining the strictly professional boundary we had established. As Synapse's reputation grew, so did interest from larger healthcare systems and national medical suppliers. By the end of our second year of operation, we had expanded to 87 employees and implemented our platform in 34 hospitals and 7 medical supply companies. Revenue had tripled, and we were approaching profitability ahead of projections. This success attracted attention from larger healthcare technology corporations seeking to expand their integration capabilities. The first acquisition offer came from Centaur Health, a publicly traded company specializing in hospital administration systems. They're offering $65 million, Elaine Margolis explained during an emergency board meeting. That's nearly 5 times our current valuation. It's a strong offer, agreed Marcus Reed, especially given our relatively early stage. I studied the proposal documentation carefully. Their integration strategy indicates they would dismantle our platform and incorporate components into their existing architecture. That's standard practice in acquisitions, Daniela Martinez noted. They're buying the technology and talent, not necessarily the complete product as it stands. But our platform works specifically because it's integrated, I argued. Fragmenting the architecture would undermine the core methodology that makes it effective. Professor Abernathy nodded agreement. The workflow integration is what distinguishes Synapse. Dismantling it defeats the purpose. The discussion continued for hours, weighing financial opportunity against mission integrity. For early investors like Horizon Partners, the acquisition offered substantial returns. For employees with equity stakes, it represented significant personal windfalls. But for me, the decision transcended financial considerations. I founded Synapse to transform healthcare technology integration, I reminded the board, not to develop features for a larger corporation's existing platform. I recommend we decline the offer and continue our independent growth trajectory. The board ultimately supported my recommendation, though not without reservation from some members. Declining a $65 million acquisition offer at our stage of development was unconventional, but I remained convinced that our independent approach offered greater long-term value. Following the rejected acquisition, we accelerated our growth strategy. The company secured an additional $20 million in Series B funding, allowing expansion into new market segments and further development of our core platform. We opened a second office in Chicago to better serve Midwestern clients and began exploring international opportunities through Canadian hospital partnerships. My professional responsibilities expanded correspondingly. While I remained deeply involved in product architecture and development methodology, I increasingly focused on strategic direction, industry relationships, and organizational culture. My technical team had grown from 3 initial developers to a department of 45 engineers, requiring multiple layers of management and more formalized processes. Throughout this period, I completed my degree requirements through Northeastern's cooperative education program, earning my bachelor's in computer science with a specialization in healthcare informatics. The university featured me in alumni publications as an entrepreneurial success story, highlighting the pathway from research assistant to CEO. My 22nd birthday arrived with little personal celebration, but significant professional milestones. Forbes magazine included me in their 30 Under 30 list for healthcare innovation. Synapse secured its 50th hospital implementation. Our Chicago office expanded to 30 employees, and most significantly, we released version 2.0 of our platform, incorporating advanced machine learning capabilities that could identify potential workflow improvements based on actual usage patterns. This technological advancement attracted attention from healthcare systems nationwide, including Massachusetts Medical Partners, a network of 6 hospitals and 20 outpatient facilities across New England. Their Chief Information Officer, Dr. Alan Bernstein, requested a personal meeting to discuss potential implementation across their entire system. "Your platform addresses exactly the integration challenges we've been struggling with," he explained during our initial consultation, particularly the disconnects between our outpatient clinics and inpatient facilities. "Those transitions are notoriously difficult," I agreed. "Patients experience them as a single care journey, but the systems treat them as entirely separate entities." Dr. Bernstein nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And your workflow approach actually acknowledges that reality instead of forcing providers to adapt to artificial system boundaries." Massachusetts Medical Partners represented our largest potential client to date, a comprehensive implementation that would span multiple facilities and care environments. The contract value exceeded all our previous implementations combined, with corresponding visibility throughout the healthcare industry. During the proposal development process, Dr. Bernstein mentioned something that caught my attention. "We've been particularly impressed with your results at Westbrook Medical Supplies. Their integration with our procurement systems has dramatically reduced order errors and back orders." "I'm glad to hear it's been beneficial," I replied carefully. "Richard Westbrook himself recommended we consider your platform, said it transformed their operations in ways he hadn't thought possible." This unexpected endorsement from my father, offered without obligation or direct personal benefit, suggested a shift in his assessment of my work that transcended our complicated history. The Massachusetts Medical Partners implementation proceeded smoothly, further enhancing Synapse's reputation and market position. Each successful deployment expanded our footprint in the healthcare ecosystem, creating a network effect as hospitals, suppliers, and other stakeholders experience the benefits of seamless workflow integration. By our 3rd anniversary, Synapse had grown to 136 employees across 3 offices, with implementations in 78 healthcare facilities and 16 medical suppliers. Annual revenue approached $45 million, with healthy profit margins and strong growth projections. This sustained success attracted renewed acquisition interest, this time from Vector Health Systems, the same company that had offered me a position before Synapse's founding. Their approach was more sophisticated than Centaur Health's earlier offer, emphasizing partnership potential rather than absorption. "We're proposing a structured acquisition that would maintain Synapse as an independent division within Vector," explained their CEO, James Harrison, during preliminary discussions. "Your team would continue development and implementation under your leadership, with access to Vector's resources and client base." The proposal valued Synapse at $180 million, a remarkable valuation for a 3-year-old company, reflecting both our current market position and future growth potential. Unlike the previous acquisition offer, Vector's approach preserved our platform integrity and development methodology while providing significant expansion opportunities. "We should consider this seriously," Elaine advised during our private discussion following the initial presentation. "Vector understands the value of your approach. They're not looking to dismantle what you've built, but to scale it more rapidly than we might achieve independently." "What about control?" I asked. "Would I maintain decision authority over Synapse's direction?" "The proposal includes a 3-year leadership guarantee with significant autonomy," she confirmed. "After that, it would depend on performance and strategic alignment." The opportunity required careful consideration. While I had resisted previous acquisition interest, Vector's approach addressed many of my concerns about maintaining platform integrity and development philosophy. Their resources could accelerate our growth trajectory and expand our impact throughout the healthcare ecosystem. After extensive discussion with our executive team and board, we engaged in formal negotiations with Vector, focusing on guarantees of operational independence and continued development control. The process stretched over several months, with multiple revisions to ensure alignment of expectations and objectives. Throughout the negotiation process, I found myself reflecting on the journey from rejected daughter to sought-after CEO. The acquisition would provide financial security beyond anything I could have imagined when leaving home with a single duffel bag. More significantly, it validated the vision my parents had dismissed as impractical and the skills they had characterized as merely recreational. The final agreement valued Synapse at $210 million, with structured earnouts that could increase the total to $275 million based on performance milestones. I would join Vector's executive leadership team while maintaining direct control of Synapse operations and product development for a minimum of 3 years. Key employees received significant retention packages, ensuring continuity during the FUR transition. For me personally, the acquisition provided both validation and irony. My equity stake translated to approximately $42 million. Ironically, precisely 21 times the college fund my parents had redirected to Catherine. The mathematics of this coincidence wasn't lost on me, though I kept the observation to myself. The acquisition announcement generated significant industry attention. Healthcare technology publications featured extensive coverage of the deal and its implications for integration standards. Business journals highlighted the successful exit for a female-founded healthcare startup. Local Boston media emphasized the homegrown innovation story. Among the many congratulatory messages I received was a brief email from Catherine. Impressive achievement. 210 million makes our college fund seem rather insignificant in retrospect. Parents saw the news. Dad seemed surprisingly proud. Call him sometime? He's not good at reaching out. I considered her suggestion but ultimately decided against immediate personal contact. The acquisition process would require my complete focus, and Vector's integration plans involved expansion initiatives that would significantly affect Westbrook Medical and other supplier clients. The acquisition closed 3 months later, following regulatory approval and final documentation. At the signing ceremony, James Harrison welcomed me to Vector's leadership team with unexpected candor. "I knew we should have hired you 3 years ago," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Would have been considerably cheaper." The transition into Vector's corporate structure proceeded more smoothly than I had anticipated. Our complementary technologies and compatible corporate cultures facilitated integration while maintaining Synapse's distinctive approach to development and implementation. 6 months post-acquisition, Vector announced a strategic initiative targeting medical supply chain optimization, a comprehensive program to standardize integration between suppliers and healthcare systems nationwide. The initiative would leverage Synapse's platform as the technical foundation, positioning our methodology as an industry standard. "We want to create a certification program for medical suppliers," James explained during the planning session. "Those meeting our integration standards would receive preferred status with Vector-affiliated healthcare systems." The program represented a transformative opportunity for medical suppliers nationwide, potentially reshaping industry practices and relationships. For established companies like Westbrook Medical Supplies, adaptation would be essential for maintaining competitive position and market access. I recognized immediately that this initiative would fundamentally affect my father's company. While Westbrook Medical had already implemented our basic integration platform, the new certification program would require additional system modifications and operational changes. "Should we handle Westbrook Medical differently given your personal connection?" James asked when reviewing the implementation schedule. "No," I replied firmly. "They should receive exactly the same treatment as any other supplier in the program. No special considerations, positive or negative." The certification program launched with significant industry promotion, establishing an 18-month timeline for suppliers to achieve compliance. As anticipated, it generated both enthusiasm and resistance throughout the medical supply ecosystem. with established companies generally more hesitant than newer market entrants. 2 months after the announcement, Vector's board of directors established a special committee to oversee the certification program and evaluate participating suppliers. James nominated me to chair this committee, citing my unique understanding of both hospital and supplier workflows. "This is your methodology in action," he argued during our discussion. "You should guide its implementation across the industry." The appointment placed me in a position of direct authority over all participating medical suppliers, including Westbrook Medical Supplies. My father's company, which had once seemed beyond my reach, would now require my approval to maintain its competitive position in the healthcare market. The irony was complete. The daughter whose technological interests had been dismissed as a hobby would now determine whether her father's company met industry standards for technological integration. Life had come full circle in a way none of us could have predicted. The question that remained was how to wield this unexpected authority, not for personal vindication, but for genuine industry advancement. The Vector Healthcare Supplier Certification Program quickly became the industry's most significant integration initiative. Hospital systems nationwide embraced the standardized approach, incorporating certification requirements into their procurement, policies, and contract renewals. For medical suppliers, certification shifted from optional to essential for maintaining market position. As committee chair, I established rigorous but fair evaluation protocols, focusing on actual integration capabilities rather than superficial compliance. Each participating supplier underwent a 3-phase assessment: technical system evaluation, workflow analysis, and performance monitoring. Only companies demonstrating genuine integration effectiveness would receive certification. The program's launch generated immediate industry conversation. Healthcare journals published analytical pieces about its potential impact on supply chain efficiency. Medical business publications interviewed suppliers about implementation challenges and strategic adjustments. Industry conferences featured panel discussions examining the certification's long-term implications. Throughout this period, I maintained professional distance from Westbrook Medical's certification process, delegating their evaluation to other committee members to avoid potential conflicts. This separation preserved the program's integrity while protecting both companies from accusations of favoritism or bias. 3 months into the program, our committee received troubling data about Westbrook Medical's integration performance. Despite their early adoption of our basic platform, their implementation showed significant gaps in critical areas, particularly inventory transparency and order processing automation. These deficiencies placed their certification status at risk. "The metrics don't lie," noted Dr. Sarah Chen, our technical evaluation director, during our weekly committee meeting. Westbrook Medical's system integration falls 27% below certification thresholds in 3 key categories. "Have they been notified of these deficiencies?" I asked, maintaining professional composure despite my personal connection. "We sent the standard preliminary assessment report last week," confirmed Marcus Barrett, our supplier relations director. "Their CIO acknowledged receipt but hasn't provided a substantive response." The situation presented a delicate challenge. While I had recused myself from direct evaluation of Westbrook Medical, my position as committee chair meant I couldn't ignore significant compliance issues with a major supplier. My responsibility to the program's integrity required addressing their performance gaps, regardless of personal history. After careful consideration, I decided to send a formal committee notification to all suppliers with similar deficiencies, emphasizing certification deadlines and offering technical consultation to address integration challenges. The letter, sent under my signature as committee chair, went to 17 companies including Westbrook Medical. 2 days later, James Harrison stopped by my office, his expression unusually serious. "I just received a call from Richard Westbrook," he said without preamble. He was rather direct about our certification requirements. My stomach tightened. What specifically did he say? He suggested the requirements were unnecessarily stringent and potentially designed to disadvantage traditional suppliers in favor of newer market entrants. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the implied accusation. The requirements are based on documented integration metrics and established workflow efficiency standards. All suppliers received identical evaluation criteria. James nodded. That's essentially what I told him. He then mentioned his personal connection to the program leadership and requested a private meeting to discuss Westbrook Medical's specific situation. The moment I had anticipated since accepting the committee chair position had arrived. My father was attempting to leverage our relationship to influence the certification process, exactly the scenario I had sought to prevent through recusal. Did he specifically reference me? I asked. Not by name, James replied carefully. But the implication was clear. I considered the situation from multiple perspectives: personal, professional, and strategic. How I handled this request would establish precedent for the entire certification program while inevitably affecting my complex relationship with my father. The appropriate response, I said finally, is that all suppliers receive the same evaluation process, and special meetings with committee leadership outside the established protocol would undermine program integrity. Westbrook Medical is welcome to schedule a standard technical consultation with our assessment team, just like any other supplier. James studied me for a moment, then nodded approval. Perfectly handled. I'll convey that response. He paused, before adding, "This can't be easy, given your history." The history is precisely why maintaining strict protocol is essential, I replied. The certification program must be beyond reproach, especially regarding suppliers with any connection to committee members. The following week, Westbrook Medical requested the standard technical consultation offered to all suppliers with compliance gaps. The meeting was scheduled with our assessment team, without my participation, to review integration deficiencies and recommend remediation steps. I received the consultation summary as part of routine committee reporting. Our technical team had identified systemic issues with Westbrook Medical's implementation, stemming primarily from incomplete adoption of workflow integration principles. Their technical staff had implemented the basic connectivity components but resisted fundamental process changes required for true integration effectiveness. Classic partial implementation, observed Dr. Chen during our review. They wanted the technical interface without the organizational adaptation. The assessment team had provided Westbrook Medical with detailed remediation requirements and a clear timeline. Address the critical deficiencies within 60 days, or risk certification, denial, which would affect their status with vector-affiliated hospital systems nationwide. 2 weeks after this consultation, I received an unexpected visitor at Synapse's Boston headquarters. My assistant interrupted an afternoon meeting with unusual hesitation. I apologize for the disruption, but Eleanor Westbrook is here requesting to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insistent. My mother. Here, in my office building, without warning. I hadn't seen her since leaving home nearly 4 years earlier. Our only communication had been brief, formal exchanges during Catherine's medical school graduation, an event I had attended primarily to support my sister, maintaining polite distance from my parents throughout the ceremony. After a moment's consideration, I nodded. Please show her to the small conference room. I'll be there shortly. I concluded my meeting efficiently, then took a few moments to compose myself before heading to the conference room. Through the glass wall, I could see my mother sitting stiffly at the table, her posture as perfect as always, her appearance meticulously maintained despite being a decade older than in my memories. She rose as I entered, her expression a complex mixture of pride and uncertainty. Olivia, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Mother, I acknowledged with a professional nod. This is unexpected. Your office is impressive, she observed, glancing around the sleek conference room with its views of the Boston skyline. The whole building is quite modern. I recognized her conversational deflection, an old habit when approaching difficult topics. I assume you're here about Westbrook Medical's certification status, I said directly, taking a seat across from her. She seemed momentarily taken aback by my directness, then nodded. Your father is concerned about the timeline for addressing the integration requirements. The changes would necessitate significant operational adjustments. The same requirements apply to all suppliers in the program, I explained evenly. The timeline reflects industry implementation standards. I understand that, but surely some flexibility might be possible given the circumstances. What circumstances specifically? I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. She hesitated, then stated plainly, the family connection. I maintained my professional composure, though her words stung more than anticipated. After years of minimal contact, this was her approach, seeking special treatment for my father's company based on the very relationship they had effectively severed. Mother, I've recused myself from all direct evaluation of Westbrook Medical, precisely to avoid conflicts of interest. The assessment team has provided standard remediation guidelines based on objective performance metrics. Any deviation from established protocol would compromise the entire certification program. She studied me with new awareness, perhaps seeing for the first time the professional I had become rather than the daughter who had disappointed her expectations. Your father doesn't adjust easily to change, she said finally, especially when directed by others. The certification isn't optional, I explained. Hospital systems nationwide are incorporating these standards into their procurement requirements. Without certification, Westbrook Medical would lose access to significant market segments. She nodded slowly, accepting this reality. He should have listened to you years ago, she observed unexpectedly. About technology integration. The comment, the closest thing to an acknowledgement of their past dismissal I had ever heard, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, she continued. Catherine speaks of you often, you know. She follows your company's progress, reads articles about your work. She keeps a file. This revelation surprised me. Catherine and I maintained cordial but distant communication, exchanging occasional messages without substantial connection. The certification requirements, my mother continued after a moment, are they something Catherine could help explain to your father? She's completed her residency now, working at Massachusetts General. The medical perspective might make the changes more palatable to him. The suggestion was unexpected but potentially valuable. Catherine's medical credential, the very educational path my parents had prioritized over mine, might indeed provide a bridge for explaining technical requirements to my father in terms he would respect. That could be helpful, I acknowledged. If Catherine understands the integration principles and their clinical implications. She's been studying your work, my mother repeated. More than any of us realized, I think. This conversation, so different from what I had anticipated, suggested complexities in my family's perspective I hadn't considered. My mother's presence here, her tentative acknowledgement of past mistakes, Catherine's apparent interest in my work, all indicated shifts beneath the surface of our fractured relationships. I can arrange for Catherine to receive a technical briefing on the certification requirements, I offered. If she's willing to serve as liaison, it might facilitate Westbrook Medical's implementation process. My mother nodded, visibly relieved. That would be helpful. She hesitated, then added quietly, Your father follows your work too, you know. He has a subscription to Healthcare Technology Review, reads every article that mentions Synapse. The image of my father secretly tracking my career struck me as both surprising and somehow poignant. Had there been pride mixed with his stubborn refusal to reach out directly? Regret beneath his maintained distance? The certification requirements aren't punitive, I said, softening my tone slightly. They're designed to create genuine integration that benefits both suppliers and healthcare providers. Westbrook Medical could emerge stronger from the process if they embrace the changes rather than resist them. I'll convey that perspective, she promised, rising to leave. At the door, she paused. Your office, it's exactly as I would have expected. Practical but impressive. Like you. After she departed, I remained in the conference room, processing the unexpected encounter. My mother's visit represented the first genuine acknowledgement, however, indirect, that my chosen path had proven more valid than they had recognized. Not an apology, not a reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of a shift in perspective. The following week, Catherine requested a formal briefing on the certification requirements. I arranged for our technical team to provide a comprehensive overview, focusing on clinical workflow implications rather than technical specifications. I didn't attend personally, maintaining appropriate separation while facilitating the educational process. Dr. Chen reported afterward that Catherine had demonstrated surprising technical aptitude and genuine interest in the integration principles. She asked excellent questions about workflow efficiency and clinical documentation, more sophisticated than most medical professionals we brief. This feedback reinforced my mother's suggestion that Catherine had been following my work more closely than our limited communication indicated. Perhaps her own experiences in hospital systems had validated the integration challenges I had identified years earlier. 2 days after Catherine's briefing, I received a formal message from Westbrook Medical's executive office requesting a meeting with their full leadership team to discuss comprehensive implementation of the certification requirements. The message, signed by my father as CEO, included a notable sentence. We recognize the validity of the integration approach and commit to full implementation rather than minimal compliance. This represented a significant shift from their initial resistance. While I couldn't attend personally due to my recusal, I ensured our most experienced implementation specialists were assigned to the project, with instructions to provide whatever support Westbrook Medical required to achieve comprehensive integration. Over the following weeks, reports from our assessment team indicated remarkable progress. Westbrook Medical had mobilized resources for a complete system overhaul, addressing not just the technical requirements, but the underlying workflow principles. My father had apparently embraced the integration methodology with unexpected thoroughness, directing his team to implement changes that exceeded minimum certification requirements. 6 weeks into the remediation period, Dr. Chen requested an urgent meeting. Westbrook Medical's implementation has progressed so significantly that they qualify for our advanced integration designation, she explained. They've moved beyond basic compliance to comprehensive workflow integration across their entire operation. It's actually becoming a model implementation we could use for other suppliers. The transformation was remarkable, from resistance to exemplary adoption, in less than 2 months. I wondered about the conversations that had occurred within Westbrook Medical, the influence Catherine might have exercised, the changing perspectives that had facilitated this shift. When our committee convened to review certification status, for the initial group of suppliers, Westbrook Medical received not just standard certification, but special recognition for excellence in implementation. The formal announcement would be made at Vector's annual healthcare conference, where certified suppliers would be publicly acknowledged for their achievement. The conference, scheduled for the following month in Boston, would bring together healthcare executives, technology leaders, and medical suppliers from across the country. As committee chair, I would present the certification awards, including the special recognition for Westbrook Medical. The professional and personal worlds I had carefully kept separate were about to converge in a very public forum. After years of limited contact and careful distance, I would formally recognize my father's company for excellence in implementing the very technological approach he had once dismissed as irrelevant. Life had indeed come full circle, but in ways far more complex and nuanced than simple vindication. The journey from rejected daughter to industry authority had transformed not just my circumstances, but my perspective on success, validation, and the complicated nature of family relationships. As the conference approached, I found myself contemplating not just the professional significance of the certification program, but the personal implications of this unexpected convergence. How would my father respond to receiving recognition from the daughter whose educational choices he had once deemed unworthy of support? How would I navigate the public intersection of professional authority and personal history? The answers would soon become clear, as the paths we had followed, once divergent but now unexpectedly reconnected, brought us to a moment neither of us could have anticipated 4 years earlier. Vector's annual healthcare conference transformed Boston's Seaport World Trade Center into a showcase of medical innovation. Exhibition halls displayed cutting-edge technologies from digital diagnostics to robotic surgical systems. Presentation theaters hosted discussions on healthcare transformation and technological integration. Networking spaces buzzed with conversations between hospital executives, technology developers, and medical suppliers. As conference keynote speaker and certification committee chair, I had responsibilities throughout the 3-day event. My schedule included panel moderation, executive briefings, and media interviews, culminating in the certification recognition ceremony scheduled for the final evening. The night before the conference opened, James Harrison hosted a private dinner for Vector's executive leadership team and key industry partners. The gathering served both celebratory and strategic purposes, acknowledging the certification program's successful implementation while strengthening relationships with influential healthcare decision-makers. I arrived at the restaurant's private dining room to find James deep in conversation with Richard Westbrook. My father stood with his back to the entrance, unaware of my arrival. Their discussion appeared animated but cordial, punctuated by occasional nods of agreement. James spotted me immediately, his expression signaling both welcome and slight concern. "Olivia, perfect timing. Richard and I were just discussing the remarkable transformation at Westbrook Medical." He gestured me forward. "Richard, I believe you're acquainted with our certification committee chair?" My father turned, his expression shifting from professional congeniality to momentary surprise. "Olivia," he acknowledged with a formal nod. James was explaining the impact of the certification program across supplier systems. "The program has exceeded our initial projections," I responded professionally, maintaining appropriate distance while colleagues observed our interaction. Particularly among suppliers who embraced comprehensive implementation rather than minimal compliance. "Westbrook Medical certainly falls into that category," James noted. "Richard was just sharing their performance improvements since implementing the advanced integration protocols." My father nodded, his expression carefully controlled. "Our order processing efficiency has increased 42% in the past quarter. Hospital procurement integration has virtually eliminated discrepancies and returns." "Impressive metrics," I acknowledged. "Your implementation team must have worked diligently to achieve such comprehensive integration." "They had excellent guidance," he replied after a moment's hesitation. "The technical briefing your team provided to Catherine was particularly helpful in translating integration requirements into operational directives." The mention of Catherine signaled both a bridge between us and acknowledgement of the family, dynamics at play beneath our professional interaction. Before the conversation could progress further, James was called away to greet arriving guests, leaving my father and me momentarily alone. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history and complex emotions. He broke it first, his voice lowered to ensure privacy. "Your mother mentioned she visited your office." "She did," I confirmed. "It was unexpected, but constructive." He nodded, seeming to search for appropriate words. "The certification requirements, they're transforming our operations in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not just technical efficiencies, but fundamental workflow improvements." That's precisely their purpose, I explained. True integration requires operational adaptation, not just system connectivity. Yes, he agreed, surprising me with his ready acknowledgement. I see that now. The simple statement carried significant weight, a tacit admission that my approach to healthcare technology, once dismissed as impractical, had proven its value in measurable business outcomes. Before our conversation could continue, other executives joined us, shifting the discussion to broader industry trends. Throughout the evening, I maintained professional composure while acutely aware of my father's presence across the table. He participated actively in group discussions, occasionally referencing Westbrook Medical's implementation experience with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for the methodology I had developed. The conference opened the following morning, with my keynote address to over 2,000 healthcare executives, technology leaders, and medical professionals. From the podium, I outlined the certification program's purpose, methodology, and preliminary outcomes, emphasizing the transformative potential of genuine workflow integration across the healthcare ecosystem. True integration isn't about connecting systems, I explained to the attentive audience. It's about understanding and respecting the human workflows that animate those systems. Technology should adapt to how healthcare actually functions, not force providers and patients to adapt to technological limitations. Throughout the presentation, I noticed my father sitting in the front row, attentively taking notes, a detail that might have seemed inconsequential to others, but carried profound significance given our history. 4 years earlier, he had dismissed my technological insights as irrelevant hobby interests. Now he was documenting my expertise before an audience of industry leaders. The conference schedule kept us separated during the following days, our paths occasionally crossing in exhibition halls or between sessions, but without opportunity for substantive interaction. I glimpsed Catherine attending a technical presentation on clinical workflow integration, and my mother at a reception for hospital executives, but maintained professional focus on my conference responsibilities. The certification recognition ceremony, scheduled for the final evening in the grand ballroom, would bring our inevitable direct interaction. As committee chair, I would present certifications to 34 qualifying suppliers, including the special recognition for excellence to Westbrook Medical and 2 other companies that had exceeded standard requirements. The ballroom filled, with attendees in formal business attire, round tables arranged throughout the space, a stage at the front with projection screens displaying the Vector and Certification Program logos. James Harrison opened the ceremony with remarks about the program's significance for healthcare integration, then introduced me as the architect of the methodology and chair of the certification committee. Taking the podium, I outlined the certification requirements, evaluation process, and significance for hospital-supplier relationships before beginning the recognition presentations. Each certified supplier received acknowledgement of their achievement, represented by their CEO or designated executive accepting a certification emblem and digital credential for their systems. Westbrook Medical was scheduled last among the special recognition recipients, creating an inevitable moment I had both anticipated and prepared for. As their company name appeared on the screen, I maintained professional composure while scanning the audience. Westbrook Medical Supplies has achieved special recognition for excellence in implementation, I announced to the assembled industry leaders. Their integration platform demonstrates exemplary adaptation of workflow principles, exceeding standard requirements in all evaluation categories. Their transformation from traditional supplier systems to comprehensive integration represents precisely the kind of operational evolution our program was designed to facilitate. My father approached the stage, his expression a complex mixture of professional pride and personal emotion. As he reached the podium, I extended my hand formally, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Congratulations on Westbrook Medical's achievement, I said, presenting the special recognition emblem. Your implementation team has established a benchmark for supplier integration excellence. He accepted the recognition, then surprised me by addressing the audience directly. Westbrook Medical's transformation reflects more than technical compliance, he stated clearly. It represents a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between suppliers and healthcare providers, a perspective championed by Olivia Westbrook long before it became industry standard. The acknowledgement, public, explicit, and unexpected, momentarily disrupted my professional composure. My father continued, his voice steady, but with an underlying emotional current, discernible perhaps only to me. Sometimes innovation comes from unexpected sources, and wisdom from voices we initially fail to recognize. Westbrook Medical is grateful for the guidance that has transformed not just our systems, but our understanding of effective healthcare integration. The audience applauded as he returned to his seat, leaving me to conclude the ceremony with final remarks about the program's future direction. Throughout the remaining presentation, I maintained professional focus while processing the significance of my father's unexpected public acknowledgement. At the reception following the ceremony, industry leaders and technology executives circulated through the ballroom, networking and discussing implementation experiences. I fulfilled my responsibilities as committee chair, engaging with certified suppliers and healthcare executives while navigating the complex personal undercurrents of the evening. Eventually, the inevitable moment arrived. My parents approached together, accompanied by Catherine in formal attire, presumably attending as Westbrook Medical's clinical advisor. "Congratulations on the program's success," my mother offered, her expression carefully composed. "The industry response appears overwhelmingly positive." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining professional demeanor while acknowledging the personal dimension of our interaction. "The supplier implementations have exceeded our projections, particularly in operational impact." Catherine stepped forward, her confidence in medical settings evident in her posture and expression. "The clinical workflow integration is particularly effective," she observed. "Massachusetts General has implemented similar protocols in our department based on the certification standards." This information surprised me. I hadn't been aware that Catherine's hospital had adopted protocols derived from our methodology. Before I could respond, my father spoke, his voice measured but direct. "Westbrook Medical would not have achieved certification without your program's guidance," he acknowledged. "The implementation has transformed our operations in ways I hadn't anticipated." The statement, coming after his public recognition on stage, represented a significant shift from his previous dismissal of my technological insights. Not quite an apology for past misjudgments, but an acknowledgement of my professional contribution that carried unmistakable personal subtext. "The certification program is designed to facilitate exactly that kind of transformation," I replied, carefully. "Your implementation team apparently embraced the methodology fully rather than settling for minimal compliance. They had excellent direction," he noted, glancing briefly at Catherine before returning his gaze to me. "From multiple sources." The implication was clear. Catherine had helped translate the technical requirements into terms my father could embrace, bridging the gap between my technological approach and his traditional business perspective. The sister whose medical education had once been prioritized over my technological interests had ultimately helped validate those very interests within the family business. Our conversation continued briefly in professionally appropriate terms, observed by industry colleagues circulating through the reception. As they prepared to depart, my father hesitated, then spoke in a lower tone intended for my ears alone. "The company board meets next month to discuss succession planning and organizational restructuring. Your perspective would be valuable if you were willing to share it. Professionally, of course." The invitation represented more than a request for consulting input. It signaled recognition of my expertise and, perhaps more significantly, acknowledgement that my chosen path had proven more prescient than he had once believed. "I would need to consult with Vector's leadership regarding potential conflicts of interest," I replied cautiously. but I could potentially provide general industry insights without compromising my position. He nodded, understanding. Of course. Professional boundaries must be maintained. After a moment's pause, he added, Catherine hosts monthly dinners at her new home. Perhaps you might attend one, if your schedule permits. Outside professional contexts. The invitation, tentative, awkward, but unmistakably genuine, suggested possibilities for reconnection beyond the certification program and industry interactions. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter based on mutual professional respect, rather than the hierarchical expectations that had fractured our relationship years earlier. I'll check my calendar, I responded, neither committing nor refusing, acknowledging the possibility while maintaining appropriate boundaries. As they departed, Catherine lingered briefly. I have all your articles, she said quietly. Everything you've published on healthcare integration. Your work at Mass General has transformed our clinical documentation processes. She hesitated, then added, I was wrong, that night at dinner years ago, about technology versus medicine. They're not separate paths. They're increasingly interconnected. This acknowledgement from the sister whose educational path had been prioritized over mine carried particular significance, recognition not just of my professional success, but of the validity of my vision for healthcare technology. The evening concluded with final networking conversations and closing remarks from James Harrison, celebrating the certification program's success and its implications for healthcare integration nationwide. Throughout the remainder of the event, I maintained professional focus while processing the unexpected personal dimensions that had emerged. Later that night, alone in my hotel room overlooking Boston Harbor, I reflected on the evening's significance. Beyond professional accomplishment, my father's public acknowledgement, my mother's tentative outreach, Catherine's professional respect, all represented shifts I could not have anticipated when leaving home years earlier. The journey from rejected daughter to industry authority had come full circle, not in triumph or vindication, but in more nuanced realization. Success hadn't simply proven my parents wrong, it had transformed all of us in ways that transcended our initial conflict. My father had evolved from dismissing technology to embracing integration. Catherine had grown from medical superiority to technological appreciation. My mother had moved from silent complicity to tentative reconnection. And I had developed from rejected daughter to confident leader, comfortable with both professional authority and personal complexity. The college fund that had once represented their dismissal of my potential now seemed almost trivial compared to what I had built. Not just financial success or professional validation, but a methodology that was transforming healthcare delivery nationwide. As I prepared for the conference's final day, I recognized that true success wasn't measured in vindicating past wounds, but in creating future impact. The recognition ceremony hadn't simply positioned me as my parents' professional superior. It had created space for mutual respect that might, eventually, heal wounds on all sides. The path forward remained uncertain, the personal relationships still fragile beneath professional interactions. But possibilities had emerged that seemed unimaginable in the rain-soaked moment of departure years earlier. Possibilities based not on familial obligation, but on earned respect and evolving perspectives. The daughter they had rejected had indeed become someone they never anticipated, not just their professional superior, but a leader whose vision extended beyond personal validation to genuine industry transformation. The Vector Healthcare Conference concluded with significant industry momentum behind the certification program. Hospital systems nationwide began incorporating certification requirements into their procurement policies, creating powerful incentives for medical suppliers to adopt comprehensive integration standards. Trade publications featured analyses of certified suppliers' performance improvements, reinforcing the business case for workflow integration beyond mere technical compliance. Following the conference, I returned to my regular responsibilities. At Vector, focusing on strategic expansion of the synapse division and continued refinement of our integration methodologies. The unexpected interactions with my family remained in the background of my thoughts, neither dismissed nor immediately addressed as professional obligations took precedence. 2 weeks later, James Harrison requested a meeting to discuss Westbrook Medical Supplies. The serious expression on his face as he entered my office suggested complicated developments. "The board received an interesting proposal yesterday," he began without preamble. "Westbrook Medical has approached Vector about a potential strategic partnership, possibly leading to acquisition." The information caught me completely by surprise. My father had made no mention of such intentions during our interactions at the conference. "What specifically are they proposing?" I asked, maintaining professional composure despite the personal implications. "Initially, a co-development agreement for advanced supply chain integration systems," James explained. "Their proposal suggests leveraging Synapse's workflow methodology with their supplier-side expertise to create a comprehensive platform that could serve as an industry standard." The proposal made strategic sense from both companies' perspectives. Westbrook Medical had established supplier relationships and operational experience that could complement our technology platform. Vector had integration expertise and hospital connections that could expand Westbrook's market position. "The proposal has significant merit," James continued, "but obviously creates potential conflicts given your personal connection to Westbrook's leadership." "I would recuse myself from any acquisition discussions or negotiations," I confirmed immediately, just as I did during the certification process. "That's the immediate concern, certainly," he acknowledged. "But there's a longer-term consideration. If Vector were to acquire Westbrook Medical, integrating it into our healthcare supply division would likely fall under your operational oversight. You would effectively become my father's boss," I completed, recognizing the extraordinary irony of the situation. James nodded. "Precisely. While technically we could establish alternative reporting structures, the reality is that Synapse's integration methodology would be central to any successful merger. Your expertise would be essential." The potential scenario seemed almost surreal, a reversal of hierarchy that neither my father nor I could have imagined when he dismissed my educational choices years earlier. Yet my professional responsibility required evaluating the proposal based on business merits rather than personal history. "The strategic rationale is sound," I analyzed, focusing on objective considerations. Westbrook Medical's supplier network, combined with our integration platform, could create significant market advantages. The workflow compatibility is already established through their certification implementation. "Those were my conclusions as well," James agreed. "The question becomes whether the personal dynamics would undermine the business potential." I considered this carefully, separating professional assessment from emotional reaction. "I believe we can establish appropriate governance structures to manage any personal complications. My father has demonstrated surprisingly thorough acceptance of our methodology during the certification process. That suggests potential for constructive, professional interaction despite our history." James studied me thoughtfully. "You've navigated the certification process with remarkable objectivity given the circumstances. I trust your judgment on this as well." He paused. "That said, before we proceed with serious discussions, you should consider the personal implications. Working with family can be challenging under the best circumstances." "I appreciate the concern," I responded. "I would suggest we evaluate the proposal through standard procedures, with appropriate recusal protocols during the assessment phase. If acquisition discussions become serious, we can address reporting structures and governance models that maintain professional boundaries." The meeting concluded with agreement to proceed cautiously, conducting preliminary evaluation while maintaining strict confidentiality regarding my personal connection to Westbrook Medical's leadership. Few people within Vector knew the full history, and maintaining professional separation would be essential for objective assessment. That evening, I received a message from Catherine inviting me to dinner at her new home in Cambridge the following weekend. The timing seemed unlikely to be coincidental given Westbrook Medical's proposal to Vector. Yet the invitation appeared genuinely personal rather than business-motivated. After consideration, I accepted with clear parameters. A Sunday evening. Dinner, no business discussion, no parents present for this initial reconnection. Catherine agreed readily to these conditions, suggesting she too recognized the need for carefully managed reestablishment of our relationship, separate from professional complications. Catherine's Cambridge home reflected her methodical personality, tastefully decorated in subdued colors, meticulously organized, with subtle evidence of her medical career in anatomical prints and medical history books arranged on bookshelves. The atmosphere was welcoming but restrained, much like our relationship itself. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she admitted as she served the gourmet pasta she had prepared. "Our communication has been minimal these past years." "With good reason," I noted, accepting the offered dish. "Your position in that final family discussion was quite clear." She nodded acknowledgement, her expression thoughtful. "I was wrong about several things," she said directly. "Not just about technology versus medicine, but about our parents' approach to our education." The admission surprised me. Catherine had always aligned perfectly with our parents' expectations and values. "What changed your perspective?" I asked. "Residency," she replied without hesitation. "Watching brilliant colleagues struggle with hospital systems that fought against their workflows rather than supporting them. Experiencing the daily frustration of technology that ignored clinical realities." She smiled slightly. "Then discovering that my younger sister had actually solved these problems while I was memorizing anatomy charts." The explanation carried genuine respect, absent from our previous interactions. As dinner progressed, our conversation revealed unexpected common ground in our professional experiences. Catherine had encountered precisely the integration challenges my technology addressed, creating natural connection despite our different disciplines. "I've integrated your workflow methodology into my department's orientation program," she explained, "teaching new residents to document clinical decision patterns that the systems often miss. It's transformed our error rates and handoff efficiency." This application of my work in Catherine's clinical environment represented more meaningful validation than any industry award, practical implementation by someone who understood healthcare delivery from the provider perspective. As the evening concluded, Catherine addressed the unspoken context with characteristic directness. "I know about Westbrook Medical's proposal to Vector," she acknowledged. "Dad mentioned the strategic rationale but not the obvious complication it creates for you." "The timing of your dinner invitation suddenly makes more sense," I observed with raised eyebrows. "The proposal and the invitation are separate matters," she clarified, "though both reflect evolution in thinking. Dad has recognized the business value of your approach. I've recognized the personal value of reconnecting regardless of professional considerations." Her distinction between business recognition and personal reconciliation resonated with my own compartmentalization of these aspects. "Both require careful boundaries," I noted. "Agreed," Catherine nodded, "which is why I suggested this dinner before any serious business discussions proceeded. We should determine if personal reconnection is possible independent of professional interactions." The approach demonstrated emotional intelligence I hadn't previously associated with my sister. Perhaps her clinical training had developed sensitivity, beyond the academic achievement our parents had always emphasized. "Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."